Hey there, pithy listeners. We're back. And this season, we are bringing you the dirt. Find the Pithy Chronicle anywhere you get your podcasts.
And get ready to sift through a lot of history's dirtiest laundry.
So I know that in our conversation just a minute ago, I've already blown your mind, but are you ready for a second mind-blowing factoid to start us off?
When have you already blown my mind?
Can't say it on the recording.
Oh, that comment. I'm sorry. The personal life comment that I had totally missed. You did blow my mind with that comment.
What can I say? I'm a shocking woman.
Yes, absolutely.
Full of mystery.
I'm ready for a second.
Yes. So.
so we're first sentence. Do it.
I'm going to hit you with it. Eustace Chapyus, our topic and gentleman of the hour.
The gentleman of the hour.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was pretty suave. He was actually not the Spanish ambassador to the Tudor Court.
Okay.
He was...
hold on.
He was not even...
But he was besties with Catherine and Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And was the supporter of their cause.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. He was not from Spain. And was not Spanish.
To be fair, Chapuys doesn't sound Spanish.
It does not, right?
It
but
sounds
like every
French.
time you see him in media...
Oh, he's always got the Spanish accent going on.
He's always got that nice tan skin and the suave salt and pepper hair, and it's like, hey man, give me a call, right?
No. I don't need Eustace Chapyus to give me a call.
Well,
I did not see that coming.
I don't know how to recover from that. But, like you said...
Oh, God.
I miss my husband. What can I say?
Okay, that's fine. I get that. We all get that. We're here for you.
We all get that.
And your fantasies, Erica.
Anyway.
Eustace Chapyus? Oh, my Lord. Okay.
So back on track. Eustace Chapyus. Not Spanish. Not the Spanish ambassador. Not from Spain.
Okay,
So he was from...
Who the flip is he?
He was born and raised in Savoy, part of the Holy Roman Empire, which is modern-day France, but he would hate for that to be the descriptor because he pretty much hated France because they wanted to take over Savoy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't realize that Savoy was a part of the Holy Roman Empire. When did it become a part of France?
Oh, let me look that up. It's a great...
It's an important question.
Savoy become part of France? Oh, look at that. Oh, wow. Savoy, along with Nice, became a part of France permanently in 1860 as the price for the French Emperor Napoleon III's consent to the formation of a state covering north-central Italy under the rule of the House of Savoy.
That's late.
That's late, right? So
I did not see that coming.
As the price for the French Emperor Napoleon III's consent to the formation of a state covering the north-central part of Italy under the rule of the House of Savoy.
Okay, what state is that?
Dude, I don't know. I'm just reading that from the Britannica, my favorite source.
I am very intrigued by everything happening. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
After the breakdown of this is, of course, from the Britannica, God's gift to the Pithy Chronicle.
Yeah.
After the breakdown of the Carolingian Empire in the 9th century, Savoy formed part of a series of kingdoms covering Middle Europe and came under the dominion of the Holy Roman Emperor in the mid-11th century. And by this date, a feudal lord, Humbert I, or Humbert the White-Handed, founder of the House of Savoy, actually controlled much of the area. Humbert, which is a terrible name, so sorry, and his successors during the Middle Ages built up a considerable state for themselves with Savoy as its base, and extending across the Alps into the Piedmont region. Yeah.
I had to look it up because I am not a geography whiz. unfair, but it's right in between Switzerland, Italy, and France. So I do see...
It's a good plot of land right there. So
it's a nice little size.
Yeah, in the early modern period, Savoy became an object of French expansion because of its strategic position commanding the roads into Italy. Now, although Savoy was occupied a number of times by French troops in the 16th and 17th century, the Dukes of Savoy were able to recover it. At the same time, however, Savoy, which was predominantly French in language, lost its hegemony among the Savoyard lands as the dukes came to favor their Italian territories. A shift reflected in the transfer of the capital from Chambéry to Turin in the Piedmont in 1563. Turin sounds like familiar because you hear a lot about the Shroud of Turin.
That and the Olympics were there.
Oh God, really?
Yeah, the Winter Olympics were in Turin.
Oh, well, as you can see, I know more about the 1500s and,
2006.
And I was alive then, I should have known.
Turin's in Italy, in case we were missing that bit. All right, so the man was born in a place that I didn't even realize was not part of France.
And it was annexed by France in 1792 during the French Revolutionary Wars.
Wow, they were like, we don't have enough going on, we're just gonna take this too?
Right.
I think I would just let it lie.
I think I would too, but it was restored to its traditional rulers in 1815, and then of course we had the whole issue with Napoleon in 1860.
What I find very interesting is that the country of France that we think of today, and this is true for almost every place that we discuss in this podcast, with the exception of England, because it was an island, and so therefore harder to morph.
Right.
But these places were not a consolidated land holding in the way that we think of. It was very fluid, and they were constantly fighting. I mean, we talked about Henry VIII constantly going out to try to reconquer lands in France, and they're like, these are mine, and these are mine. Mm-hmm. They just couldn't ever be like, oh, well, that's yours, and this is mine. I think we'll just call it.
The countries that we know of have really only been established in maybe the last 110, 15 years.
Yeah. When I lived in Italy, we learned about the Italian language and how they decided on the Florentine dialect. Right. They were just like, well, we've got 50, but we can't all speak like this. So we're going to pick one. And now the entire country, mm-hmm. which is new as a country, and before was city-states for 1,000 years, we're just going to all speak this language now. Thanks.
Please and thank you.
I mean, what a crazy thing.
Well, I've got another crazy thing for you. For once, which is shocking, we have a man who is a circa baby.
No.
I know,
Is it
right?
because he was born in a place that we didn't know was a place?
I think it was because his origins are kind of not super sure. 1488 to 1492 is kind of his circa realm, which is not bad.
Not bad, but I'd want to be 4 years younger at this point in my life. I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, I'll take 4 years back. Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. All right.
Like I said before, his parentage is unclear-ish. We know he was born into money, if not the lower nobility, because he was able to afford a very prestigious education at the University de Valence, the University of Turin, and I'm gonna butcher this, so I go ahead and apologize, but the Sapienza University of Rome, where he attained the degree of Doctor of Civil and Canon Law and received the Pope's blessing.
Holy cow! This man was very well educated for the time. 3 university degrees? Is that a thing at this stage?
I have no idea.
I did not realize that was a thing.
I didn't realize either. But I guess the point being is the Pope said, hey, you're super good at law, secular law, as well as church law. So
church law, yeah, I can see that.
Right.
Well, he was a big Catholic, capital C, in every way, okay?
Oh, in every way.
Ooh.
He then got a pretty sweet deal, in my humble, lowly opinion, working in Switzerland at the Diocese of Geneva.
Ooh.
He then moved up by working for the Duke of Savoy and the Duke of Bourbon. By 1526, he was ambassador for Charles de Bourbon, the Duke, to Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor's court in Granada.
Okay, let's put in a joke about how everyone's named Charles. Sorry. Just read that. Charles. Wait, so is that all we have for his birth and his life up until then?
Yes.
I would think that he would have to have proven like a pedigree. Is that not a thing?
I guess not.
That's fascinating.
What I could find about it wasn't clear. Some had his father as a lord, but some had him as just a wealthy dude.
Just a wealthy guy who was just trying to push his way up in the world.
Yeah, there wasn't a super clear answer, and
Well, as an ambassador, you do kind of leave your own person behind, and you represent someone else.
That's kind of what we are gonna see in this episode.
Okay.
It's largely about other people.
He was the eyes and ears.
Yeah.
And I know he was gossipy.
He was.
The man liked to tell a tale.
Oh, God. And he was so good at it. He was such a wordsmith. Completely.
Well, he had 3 degrees.
Yeah, exactly. The dude was smart.
And clearly spoke Spanish and French and Italian. So we have Charles as representative to Charles. Man moves to Granada, where I suppose he had to learn to speak Spanish, or maybe they taught him before he went. Intensive study. Spain was such an important kingdom at the time. It was so powerful, but all the courts of Europe still didn't teach Spanish as one of the main ones that you would know.
And largely it was you did everything Catholic and Latin, and then you could do French, because that was
most people learned French as the second one. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I'm ready.
Now let's be clear here about all of our Charleses, right?
Have one Charles, have them all.
Yeah, listen.
It's like a bouquet. It's a bouquet of Charleses. And Caroline is the
feminine
female to Charles, the feminine to Charles. So lay it on me.
Okay. The Duke of Bourbon was from the House of Bourbon. Ah,
shocking.
Yeah, which would eventually take the French throne from the Valois.
Okay.
Charles V was from the House of Habsburg, which would end in a genetic mess of inbreeding.
Oh my God, the Habsburg
jaw. God bless them.
Rough stuff. Oh lordy. So much inbreeding.
Charles V was also the nephew of Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife, and man oh man will we get there, okay?
So he was the nephew of Catherine of Aragon because his mother was Juana la Loca, right?
Yeah, Juana la Loca and Philip the Handsome, Philip the Fair.
He was like man candy.
He was the ruler of the Burgundian Netherlands, the titular Duke of Burgundy, and the first Habsburg king of Castile.
Right. Charles V, son of man candy. And I wouldn't call her crazy. I would say used and abused and left
life
to dry by her father and her husband. Poor Juana.
Juana la Loca.
Oh, man. Anyway, he had a lot of land.
Right.
And he, in the end, split it up amongst his heirs because he was like, it's too big for any one person to handle. I mean, I did it, sons, but you couldn't.
I mean, I could. Please give me that burden.
No, that sounds terrible.
No, I could do it.
Could you? Okay.
I am an excellent time manager and expectation manager.
I know about the expectations.
Are you doubting my time management skills here, Caroline?
No. That would be rude.
Anyway.
Okay.
So, how does our dear Eustace jump from one Charles to another?
I'm sorry. The only thing that popped into my head was dirty.
Maybe it was a proclivity.
Yeah, maybe he just had a thing for the name Charles.
I don't know. But what I will tell you is at the end of the day, it has to do with the sack of Rome.
Which one?
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, I'm sorry. When was the last?
1527.
I didn't know Rome was sacked in 1527. People can never leave it alone.
Listen, good news for you. The Britannica gave me a great article.
Are we sponsored by the Britannica? If not, we should be. Hi, Britannica.
We should be. I literally use it every time I write an episode.
Ironically, I never use it.
That's so weird.
You're weird.
No, you're weird.
No, you're weird. You know what? We're both
Fine,
weird.
I am.
We're moving on.
I'm definitely a little bit weird. The growing power of Holy Roman Emperor Charles V alarmed Pope Clement VII.
And you can see why.
Yeah, sure.
This man owns half of Europe.
Yes, absolutely. And he perceived Charles as attempting to dominate the Catholic Church and Italy, which, again,
the
fair.
Spanish monarch was doing. Yep.
Fair.
Yep.
Which, let's give him credit, is not an unfair assumption. Clement VII formed an alliance with Charles V's arch-enemy, King Francis I of France, Valois, just by the way, who was also Henry VIII's greatest frenemy of all time.
Right. They loved to hate each other, but really respected each other. They had that one time where they wrestled.
Oh, yes, which, so homoerotic, but that's neither here nor there.
It was there, actually.
Neither here nor there, whatever.
It wasn't here.
It was there, but we're gonna leave that for right now because that's a whole other supposition. This alliance between the Pope and France became known as the League of Cognac, with the express purpose to resist the Habsburg dynasty in Italy.
I am so sad that I've never heard of this.
Oh, wait, it gets better.
Okay.
Victory over the French in Pavia in 1525 left the forces of the Holy Roman Emperor dominant in Italy.
Okay.
In 1527, these forces stormed the city of Rome and embarked on an orgy of destruction and massacre, terrorizing the population and humiliating the Pope, Clement VII.
Right. He had to go find sanctuary. I did not realize this was all just because they thought Charles was getting big for his britches because he owned half of Europe. Okay.
Pope Clement had unwisely formed the alliance we just talked about, the League of Cognac.
The League of Cognac, which great name.
It is a great name.
Great name.
To challenge Charles's supremacy in Italy. Rome was not, however, attacked on the emperor's orders, but on the initiative of imperial troops angry at not being paid.
So they sacked a foreign place in anger against their Holy Roman Emperor,
who, in all fairness, had been endowed with that title by the Pope.
By the Pope. They just decided to sack and take what they could because they weren't getting paid.
Well, I mean, if you're hungry, if you're tired, and you are wronged and not getting paid, somebody's gonna pay the bill.
But the Romans didn't owe them the money.
But think about it, in their mind, that was more probable because the Pope had endowed him with these rights, whether or not they felt that he was justly endowed with these rights and titles. So if you can't get revenge on your sovereign, get revenge on the one who endowed him with these rights.
To be fair, Holy Roman Empire starts with the word holy, and that refers to Catholicism and the Pope.
And the Pope sent Charlemagne in a little bit before, but Charlemagne was the big one.
He has crowned the Holy Roman Empire.
He's crowned, yeah, exactly. So,
but this Holy Roman Empire, what Charles V had was so much more.
So much more vast
than the HRE of past generations. And
Absolutely.
So I can see why Clement was like,
maybe not.
This is getting a little out of hand. Literally, I no longer have my hand in that situation.
Right.
And I'd like to have it back.
When Clement can't control that.
Right.
These ragged and hungry soldiers, including German Landsknecht mercenaries and Spanish infantry, mutinied and marched across Rome under the command of renegade French aristocrat, the Duke of Bourbon. Does anyone remember who's working for the Duke of Bourbon right now?
Me!
Yeah, you. Tell me.
Was it Eustace Chapyus?
Indeed it was.
Excellent. I like that he's a renegade.
Yeah, right? Like, he's a rebel.
Okay.
Which is kind of crazy. The Duke of Bourbon is rising up against the Valois king and the Pope in favor of these unpaid mercenaries. which...
It's an odd choice.
Well, you can see why the Bourbon family line really kind of freaked out the Valois, right?
Yeah. They clearly can't be trusted.
I mean, no.
No one in history can be trusted.
No.
All right, go on.
The walls of Rome were poorly defended, the city's garrison numbering only 8,000 men, including 2,000 strong Swiss Guard.
Love the Swiss Guard.
The outfits, man. You can't hate on them.
There's a rumor that they were designed by Leonardo, but I don't actually think that's true.
I don't know that that's true, but the Gonfalonieri has been around for quite some time.
Yeah.
And they're fabulous, and they still dress that way today.
Yes.
Anyway, on May 6th, the rebellious imperial army launched an assault in the face of cannon and arquebus fire.
Oof.
The Duke of Bourbon was shot dead, but the men... yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Sorry.
The Duke of Bourbon...
Just gotta get him out of the way.
Yeah, right? It is pretty shocking. You'd think he'd be around for a little bit longer.
Well, and yeah.
So he was shot dead, but the men he had led swept into the city, killing everyone in sight, armed or not. The Swiss Guard fought bravely to defend St. Peter's Basilica and created enough delay to allow Pope Clement to escape down a tunnel and into the fortress of the Castel San Angelo.
It's very interesting today because we think of the Pope as a
figurehead.
Peaceful figurehead. But back in the day, I mean, the Castel Sant'Angelo was a fortress for the Pope. There's no
if and or buts about it. Like,
at this point, the Pope was in no way anti-killing.
Has the Castel San Angelo ever been taken? Do we know?
Not that I know of.
Nothing comes to mind. So there, he was besieged while the city was laid waste. The Protestant Landsknecht felt particular hatred for Catholic Rome and its idolatrous Renaissance treasures. They stabled horses in St. Peter's, but the Catholic Spanish equaled them in cruelty and destructiveness. Yeah. Clement surrendered in June, agreeing to pay a huge ransom and cede substantial territory to Charles, who, although embarrassed by the brutal conduct of his troops, was happy to accept the advantage he had gained.
So Clement was like, you have too much power and land, I'm gonna try to take you down. And instead, he found himself locked up in his own castle, unable to leave, and then paying the guy and giving him land.
Who wasn't even in charge of what happened.
Nope.
That was all Charles.
Charles of Bourbon.
Right.
Well, if you own half of Europe, the chances that you're there at the right moment, slim.
But apparently he just wasn't paying people well, and they just got out of hand. So he really had no strategic hand in this at all.
Rape and pillage.
But still
works,
got out.
Even if it's terrible.
Well, it works, but it wasn't his call. This was absolutely Charles, Duke of Bourbon.
Just being rogue.
Just doing his thing. And then
Renegade Charles Bourbon, who's now dead.
Who's now dead. And then Charles V was just like, oh, I guess I'll accept your surrender.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I'm sorry, this has to do with Chapuys. How?
Well, if you remember, our dear Charles, Duke of Bourbon, kicked the bucket, was shot dead, is, no longer really employing anyone, right? So that's
it's harder when you're dead.
It's harder when you're dead. And so our man Chapuys finds himself unemployed.
No one wants to be in that club.
Absolutely not. And while he couldn't start a podcast, he did the next best thing.
Too bad.
Too bad, because he would have been great at it.
That would have been the best podcast.
It really would.
We all would have been tuning in.
Absolutely.
The weekly gossip tell-all. Oh my lord.
Listen, he was the ultimate gossip guy.
I can't believe we didn't name ourselves the Chapuys Chronicle.
I can. But anyway. He did the next best thing. He joined the employ of the Holy Roman Emperor, the other Charles, Charles V.
Wow. Jumping ship? The one who just sacked Rome.
Yep, the very same.
Actually, he didn't sack Rome.
Yeah, I guess he didn't sack Rome.
Who
benefited
from the other Charles's Roman sack.
Yes.
There are a lot of sacks happening.
There are a lot of sacks in this episode.
So
anyway,
he jumped into Charles V's sack.
Yep. He didn't just pop into the ambassadorship. He was master of requests. for 2 years before he took up his most lasting position.
What on earth is a master of requests?
I couldn't find it.
It
but
sounds,
it sounds amazing.
nefarious. It sounds nefarious, like all the ill deeds.
I could kind of see that, though.
Yes, sire. I will answer your request.
You are a fabulous wicked.
Thank you.
So, anyway. He finally took up his lasting position, and sure, it's called ambassador.
Right.
But we really know him as president and CEO of the Anne Boleyn Haters Club International, LLC.
Oh, yes, he was. That is
Indeed.
that was fabulous. He sat at the other table at lunch.
He hated her.
He hated her. Do we think, and are we going to get into, did he hate her because he loved Catherine as a person, or was it all about the religion? Was he super PO'd that the religion was getting adjusted?
We'll get there.
Hold your horses.
We'll get there. Hold your horses. So he gets to England to replace Inigo Mendoza because his education in canon law as well as civil law, it was just superior to just about anybody.
Well, and the Pope had told him he was blessed.
Right, the Pope had personally blessed him.
That's big.
Yeah, it's a big thing when you have a papal blessing.
Even when you put the Pope into Castel Sant'Angelo with your employer,
yeah,
it's still good to have his blessing.
I mean, the Pope blessed him before that, so.
Does it count anymore if you take him hostage?
Can you take away a blessing? I don't know. That is something.
Can you be de-blessed?
You know what? Eustace could have answered that.
Oh, because he was a canon law expert.
So, back to your language discussion. He spoke fluent French, although he hated France for, as we discussed before, their designs on conquering and absorbing Savoy.
I'm gonna say, for a person whose background we don't quite know, he was very devoted to Savoy.
Right.
It's not like he was part of the ruling family.
I guess if you think about it,
really into the Savoy thing.
Think about it in music. We always learn there's such tension between the French and Italians.
Yeah.
And how they cannot stand to be similar to each other. But then they always end up passing back and forth their styles, but it's never congruent.
Sure.
So I think it's pretty safe to say that art imitates life, imitates politics. And so there you go.
So Savoy felt like it was more Italian than it was French?
I think that it felt itself...
Or it was Savoy.
They were Savoy, but I do think they felt more closely aligned with the Italians than they did the French. It was very obvious there was enmity between France and Savoy.
Okay. So he spoke fluent French, but French wasn't his first language?
No, French was his first language. He also knew Latin, of course, canon law.
There's no way he couldn't, yeah.
He was specifically sent to aid Catherine, Charles's aunt, in the king's great matter, aka his divorce.
So he did not know her prior to Henry going off the deep end.
Right.
He came in for the full experience.
He got dropped in the middle of the hurricane.
Oh, yeah. Boop. Yeah.
Sink or swim, boo.
Into the fray. Here we go.
So, with that, he moved into Austin Friars, which sounds very much like the Venetian nuns situation. A friary, but fancy.
Oh, a fancy friary.
And he was neighbors with Thomas Cromwell.
Oh, Henry's right-hand man.
Exactly.
Until he wasn't.
Until he wasn't.
Because he lost his head with like 19 chops in a bad way. It was rough.
Really? 19?
It wasn't 19, but they got the guy drunk.
The night before.
The first one went into his back, not onto his neck.
No thanks.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, believe it or not, Chapuys actually considered him a very good friend.
Thomas Cromwell.
Thomas Cromwell.
Mr. Protestant.
Mr. Protestant.
Mr. Anne Boleyn.
Mm-hmm.
Because it feels like they're kind of backing different factions.
Different horses, so to speak.
Oh, that's rough. Let's don't refer to these poor women as horses.
Let's not. Yeah, but they were on different teams.
How could they possibly be friends?
So I have quotes. I got the receipts, girl.
Oh, she's got the receipts. Okay.
For all his deep-held Catholicism and surrounding himself with deeply conservative allies in court, he had a pretty decent relationship with the Protestant master secretary,
Who the hell is the Protestant master secretary?
Thomas Cromwell.
Is that what he called himself?
Master secretary was his name, but he was Protestant.
Oh, I see. I thought that was an official.
No.
Well,
Sorry,
and of course,
that was me.
Henry didn't refer to it as Protestantism in the same way.
No, not in the same way, but I mean, Cromwell definitely was Protestant.
Yeah, but Henry didn't like that.
No, because he was a true Catholic until the day he died.
He was a true Catholic, except for the whole divorce.
Which, let's be honest, so many...
And murder.
And murder. There were...
Dude murdered 2 wives.
Look at the Holy Roman Emperor. How many people has he murdered?
Well, it depends.
A lot.
Okay, fine. All right, go on.
Anyway.
Continue.
Whatever.
I'm having a lot of trouble seeing the friendship, but I'm going to suspend disbelief.
Right.
And
which I appreciate.
You're welcome. But you brought the receipts. I'm gonna let you.
I did. I brought the receipts. So this letter is from Chapuys to Charles, describing a conversation that he and Cromwell had.
Oh my gosh.
Are you ready?
Yeah. What an amazing receipt.
Yeah.
History in the go. I can't wait. Quote,
I told Cromwell that I had for some time forebone to visit him that he might not incur suspicion of his mistress,
hold on.
Anne. At this point, Anne is on the throne.
Thank you. So at this point, Catherine is out.
Yeah, Catherine's out.
I'm assuming she's died at this point.
Actually, no. Catherine, if you
Because
look...
Catherine dies during Anne's reign.
Yeah, but Anne also dies maybe 3 months after.
Stop. Is it that close?
It's pretty close.
Oh my gosh.
She does not make it long after Catherine.
I remember that she wore yellow the day she found out.
Which a lot of
Traditional
people,
mourning color.
It is actually for the crown of Spain.
Stop it. Is that true?
Yeah, it's true.
So she has been called a bee this whole time, but she was actually wearing the traditional mourning color of Catherine's country?
If I'm going to be honest with you, I think it's a happy coincidence.
Okay, then. I was about to say, I thought she, went and danced.
I think that's coming from that she danced at the May Day celebration a few days before her arrest. And I think those two have become conflated over time.
That's possible.
Now, I would have to do the research
Okay.
before.
All right, let's get back to this very illuminating letter.
Are you ready? I had for some time forebone to visit him that he might not incur suspicion of his mistress for the talk he had previously held with me, well remembering that he had previously told me that she would like to see his head cut off. This I could not forget for the love I bore him, and I could not but wish him a more gracious mistress, and one more grateful for the inestimable service he had done the king, and that he must be aware of enraging her, else he must never expect perfect reconciliation, in which case I hoped he would see to it better than did the cardinal. Wolsey, in case anyone was wondering. As I had great belief in his dexterity and prudence, and if it was true what I had heard that the king was treating for a new marriage, it would be...
What a great phrase. Treating for a new marriage.
Exactly. It would be the way to avoid much evil, and be very much for the advantage of his master, who had been hitherto disappointed of male issue, and who knows quite well several reasons which he might sufficiently understand. And that although a more lawful marriage should follow, and male issue from it would be to the prejudice of the princess, yet the affection I bore to the honor and tranquility of the king and the kingdom, and towards him, Cromwell, particularly, made me desire another mistress, not for the hatred that I bore this one, who had never done me any harm.
Hold on.
What? Right?
My jaw is on the flippin' floor. Stop.
You're only halfway done.
Stop this. Hold on. I want to make sure that I'm reading this correctly.
Please, go ahead.
So he liked Cromwell, Mr. Protestant, enough that he's like, that's fine, you can get rid of Anne for a new one who would not disappoint in male issue. I mean, he didn't like Anne, so that makes sense.
But also he says in here, she's never done him any harm.
Yeah.
That's referencing Anne.
That's true. I feel like she has done him some harm. Well, not him, but his people.
But is it his people?
Certainly his church.
His
church.
Sure.
He's been blessed by the Pope.
He has been blessed by the Pope.
And she's gotten rid of the Pope for England.
It's so eliminating, right? Anne, who had done him no harm. Cromwell appeared to take all this in good part, and said that it was only now that he had known the frailty of human affairs, especially those of the court. And he always laid his account that if fate fell upon him as upon his predecessors, he would arm himself with patience and leave the rest to God.
Cromwell really was the martyr of martyrs, I think. I think Cromwell was very into his, if it be willed, I will just bow my head.
And let the chop go.
And let the chop come.
Well, I'm so glad he was resigned to his fate. Anyway, quote, that it was quite true that he must rely upon God's help not to fall into mischief. He then began to defend himself, saying he had never been cause of this marriage. He had never been cause of this marriage.
I have trouble believing that Cromwell said that.
I mean...
I can see that Anne might not have been his first choice.
Sure. It wouldn't have been my first choice. Who was she? Nobody.
And she had a goiter, evidently.
Apparently.
Oof.
Anyway, although seeing the king determined upon it, he had smoothed the way.
Yeah. And
that notwithstanding that the king was still inclined to pay attention to ladies, yet he believed he would henceforth live honorably and chastely, continuing in his marriage. I don't know who stood better there for that.
No one thought Henry was going to live honorably and chastely to Anne.
I don't know.
Except Anne, I think. I think Anne actually thought that. And that is so sad.
Yeah.
To think he wants me for 7 years. I'm it. This is the love of my life. And then the moment she becomes queen, he's off dallying. That would suck.
It would suck.
Okay.
Quote, he said this so coldly as to make me suspect the contrary, especially as he said so, not knowing what countenance to put on. He leaned against the window in which we were, putting his hand before his mouth to avoid smiling or to conceal it, saying afterwards that the French might be assured of one thing, that if the king his master were to take another wife, he would not seek for her among them. And then he said that with an answer came from your majesty upon the subject of our communication, we should discuss everything and do some good work.
Okay, so they're already talking about a third wife.
Mm-hmm.
And it won't be from France.
It will not be from
because
France.
He's learned that women from the French court
are not it.
I love the detail about the window and the concealing of the smile.
I know.
It's like he's writing a novel, not an official letter to his boss.
It comes to life, does it not?
Yeah, it does. It's very nice. I feel like I can see this.
It was very descriptive, quite the little vignette. It's like a movie script.
It is.
You can see them sitting in this window in...
having a little chat.
Yeah, in Wolf Hall, just chilling.
Wolf Hall, there you go.
So big shout out to Janet Vertman. I found this excerpt from her website, and it gave a great contextual synopsis. So check her out for more. Her website is in the show notes.
Yay.
Are you ready for another shocker?
Oh my gosh. No, it's been too many in this episode.
No, I've got more. So much more. Dear Eustace.
Dear,
our darling.
Dear Eustace.
Actually admitted to liking George Boleyn.
What?
Yeah. He was quoted as saying he was...
Rapin and oh.
Mm-hmm. He is quoted as saying he was charming and likable, but could not refrain from those, quote, Lutheran discussions plaguing the country.
Oh, plaguing the country.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everybody did say he was charming.
I mean...
that's how he managed to deflower so many virgins.
Yeah, willingly or otherwise.
Yeah, you don't actually know that he did it.
Yeah, we don't.
But we can still play around with history.
We can't call him a rapist without proof.
We're reading the gossip rags literally as we speak. This man was the People magazine of his day.
He was. Here is some more titillating quotes. Are you ready?
I'm so excited.
This is a letter from Eustace to Charles.
Which Charles? We're still Charles of the
Fifth.
Holy Roman Empire. Okay.
Still HRE.
HRE.
Quote, Englishmen high and low desire your majesty to send an army to destroy the venomous influence of the lady and her adherents and reform the realm. When this accursed Anne has her foot in the stirrup, she will do the queen and princess all the harm she can. She boasts that she will have the princess in her own train. One day, perhaps she will poison her, or will marry her to some varlet, while the realm itself will be made over to heresy, unquote.
Wow. It's interesting that Anne is queen at this time, but he's referring to Queen
No, this one, she's not quite queen yet.
Okay, so this is out of order.
This is not chronological.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Poison her? That's quite the accusation.
Well, and here's
But
the
he
other
knows
thing
his
that
he knows his audience. This is the nephew.
he knows his audience.
Okay.
But also, do you really think that the English wanted a Spanish invasion? Or, sorry, a Holy Roman invasion of any kind? No.
No.
That would be a no. But here is a nice little tidbit that I think is really nice. It's well known that Elizabeth I was an amazing horsewoman. And I think it's really interesting to see how often Anne is referenced with horses.
Mhm.
Especially here you can see Anne has her foot in the stirrup.
Foot in the stirrup. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting correlation.
I was thinking it was a very masculine trait.
It is.
And that what he's saying is that she's going to take over.
She's wearing the pants.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a nice little...
It is nice.
Well, he could have never known that Elizabeth would be such a wonderful horsewoman.
I didn't know Elizabeth was a wonderful horsewoman.
She was.
Fascinating.
Mm-hmm. This is all bad enough, but the man has to be tricked into acknowledging Anne as queen.
Tricked?
Uh-huh. And I guess I can see why.
Uh-huh.
He is sent to enforce Catherine and Mary and therefore the emperor's legitimacy and power. Acknowledging Anne would be the equivalent to him accepting the divorce as lawful and valid, and therefore Anne as the legitimate queen.
Okay, but did he actually do that ever?
So I'm so glad you asked. Yes, our favorite gossip guy is telling it all.
Gossip Guy. That's the title of this episode. The Gossip Guy.
These quotes, and they are long, are from his letters to, again, HRE Charles V. Quote,
To be fair, he is quite verbose.
He is incredibly verbose. Quote, I was conducted to mass by Lord Rochford,
George Boleyn.
the concubine's brother.
Ah, look at that. The concubine's brother. Wow, that's rough.
Yes. And when the king came to the offering, there was a great concourse of people, partly to see how the concubine and I behaved to each other. She was courteous enough, for when I was behind the door by which she entered, she returned merely to do me reverence as I did to her. I am told the concubine asked the king why I did not enter there as the other ambassadors did, and the king replied that it was not without good reason. After which they talked together while I conversed and made some acquaintance with the brother of the young lady to whom the king is now attached. Jane Seymour is who he's referencing there.
Oh my gosh. This is like getting a picture of everything going down. That's crazy.
Always keeping an eye upon the gestures of the king and those with him. There seemed to be some dispute and considerable anger, as I thought, between the king and Cromwell. After a considerable time, Cromwell, grumbling, left the conference, excusing himself that he was so very thirsty that he was quite exhausted, as he really was with pure vexation, and sat down out of sight of the king, where he sent for something to drink.
Oh dear.
Telling me that although he had always pretended that what he said to me was of his own suggestion, yet he had neither said nor done anything without express command from the king. On my asking him what could have made this variation in the king's will, he said he could not imagine what spirit it was, and he concluded that princes have spirits or properties which are hidden and unknown to all others. Cromwell showed covertly his dissatisfaction at the strange contradictions of his master.
I find this fascinating because this really fits in well with our episode from last week about Henry's quote-unquote madness or deterioration and
Or mysterious properties.
mysterious properties and strange contradictions. This is okay.
Yeah.
It's like you're seeing history unfold.
It is. And just as a by the way, in the show notes, I have linked the archive of all his letters.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Treasure trove.
It was so hard to
Decide.
pare down for this episode.
Fair enough.
Back to the hot goss. Quote, Cromwell told me that he who trusts in the word of princes who say and unsay things and promises himself anything from them is not overwise, as he has found on Tuesday last.
Cromwell just learned last Tuesday that you shouldn't believe what King Henry VIII says?
I don't know what happened on Tuesday last.
It took him that long to I want to know what happened on Tuesday last.
As do I. Chapuys notes in his next letter that Princess Mary and her party were jealous or angry over the fact that Chapuys bowed to Anne in this interaction.
Which he kind of has to do because she is the queen and he is the ambassador.
Well, he had avoided.
Okay.
He had avoided her and done so for a while now.
2.5 years because Jane's in the picture.
Yes. It's because Jane's in the picture.
Oh my gosh.
He protests to her that he never kissed her hand nor spoke to her. Quote, although I would not kiss or speak to the concubine, the princess, and other good persons have been somewhat jealous at the mutual reverences required by politeness which were done at the church. I refused to visit her until I had spoken to the king. If I had seen any hope from the king's answer, I would have offered not 2, but 100 candles to the she-devil, although another thing made me unwilling, that I was told she was not in favor with the king. Besides, Cromwell was quite of my opinion that I should do well to wait till I had spoken to the king, unquote.
So, let me make sure I am reading the situation. He came in, he saw her and acknowledged her, but he did not speak to her, he did not kiss her hand, he did not bow. And then he spoke to the king.
Well, he made a reverence, which is a slight bow.
A slight incline.
Right.
Okay. And then he spoke to the king and was like, oh, clearly the she-devil, the great concubine, Anne, is out. Because he's here with Jane Seymour's brother.
Right.
The tides of change are coming. And so he's like, I guess I don't have to talk to her anymore.
Yeah, but Mary was still PO'd. She was not thrilled.
I had always been under the impression that Mary, and Catherine to some extent, but more Mary, looked at Chapuys as a godfather-y type figure.
Yes, absolutely.
And trusted that he always had her best interests at heart, not the Holy Roman Empire's. Or,
right.
To be fair, I thought it was Spain. Which, did Spain have its own ambassador?
I don't think so.
So he was Holy Roman Empire ambassador, which included all of that area.
That's the way I'm interpreting it.
So more importantly, he was Charles V's ambassador.
Right. And I think it's always simplified in media because that way people understand
the connection
between Catherine and the emperor.
Right. He was employed by Mary's cousin, Catherine's nephew. That's a familial connection.
Yes, it is.
But I think it's interesting that Mary just believes she kind of owns him, and in fact, that's not his first priority. And clearly befriending Cromwell, I would think that would have really pissed off Mary. Because Cromwell was Mr. Protestant.
I don't think their relationship was well known. I think that was very under wraps.
But it makes sense as an ambassador. You've got to make friends because you want to know what's going on and you want honest dealings.
You've got to make friends.
And I think Cromwell, from everything that I've read about him, was a really good guy.
Our Book of Common Prayer is still based on the one that he wrote, so. Now, to go back to the story, thankfully for Chapuys, this insult and this contention between him and Mary was short-lived because less than a month later, Anne was meeting a certain swordsman from Calais.
Ooh. Yeah. That was a very important appointment for Anne.
And a very short turnaround, might I add.
Wow. To have been a fly on the wall. Anne was there, and Jane, and both of their brothers, and the king, and Chapuys.
And Cromwell.
Oh, and Cromwell. God, it's like all the important players in one room just looking at each other.
Just looking at each other. Going to mass. That's not mass, but mass.
Interesting.
I will give it to him. He was somewhat polite about her death. Somewhat.
Huh. Well, I mean, he had small bowed, so.
He did small bow. We actually have his quotation.
Of course we do.
Of course we do.
What did he say about the great concubine's death?
Quote, no one ever showed more courage or greater readiness to meet death than she did, having, as the report goes, begged and solicited those under whose keeping she was to hasten the execution. When the orders came from the king to have it, the execution, delayed until today, she seemed sorry and begged and entreated the governor of the tower for God's sake to go to the king and beg of him, since she was well disposed and prepared for death, she should be dispatched immediately, unquote.
So we had an interesting conversation when we did the Jane Boleyn episode about whether or not Anne thought he was actually going to kill her. And this is interesting to me because it could go both ways yet again. It could be that Anne was trying to be like, I am so ready for death. Please let the king know, to show her obedience and to show how much she trusted him, like whatever he decided was right, thinking maybe he'd change his mind. Or it could be that she knew it and she was like, I don't want to sit here another day with the swordsman who's about to take off my head hanging out.
Yet, for me, if I knew it was done, just get it done.
No, I'd want every day.
No, get it done. I don't want to sit here with this, quite literally, a Damocles.
Literal sword of Damocles.
Hanging over my head. No. Because it just, no thank you.
Well, okay, I had always read that she was quite brave in death, and so I'm intrigued that even her harshest critic, in many respects,
right,
said that she
was ready.
Took it like a man. Like,
yeah, she did.
Sounds terrible.
Honestly, better in a lot of cases.
I mean, Anne was very capable. Mm-hmm. People forget how intelligent she was, and that's one of the reasons that Henry fell in love with her, because she could really take him on with a lot of these discussions that maybe other
people would shy away
princesses would have shied away from and just been like, well, whatever you think. And Anne would be like, I got thoughts.
Well, this is a whole other episode, but the last letter that Anne wrote to the king from the tower is a masterclass in how she was trying to save her own life, but also she was trying hard. She was working to get out of this. And unfortunately, it wasn't successful, but it is a well-written letter in which she is pulling on these queenly virtues that
heartstrings.
Well, no, like the queenly requirements that she was supposed to uphold.
Right.
I mean, yes, sure, heartstrings, whatever. But it was way more of a political manipulation.
I did my job.
Than it was, I love you.
Interesting.
Of course, she does profess to love him, that no greater prince ever there was, blah, blah, blah.
Interesting.
But all of it, if you look at it through the lens of what we know about Anne and how intelligent and how savvy she was in statecraft,
obviously,
it makes you stop and think.
It does.
At this point, Henry was catching on to how Chapuys was playing the game. And he played them, as we can well see, in this next letter. It was in the early days to his marriage to Jane, which means maybe a month or two after Anne's death. And it was not terribly long after Henry Fitzroy's death, leaving only girls to inherit.
Oh, God, I hate it when that happens. It's so frustrating.
They're so incapable.
Thank goodness there was a baby infant to pass it on to very soon, because you know that the boy 2-month-old is going to be a far better choice than the full-grown woman.
Of course.
Obviously. Okay.
Quote, on leaving the company, I took Cromwell apart, who assured me that the king was very well disposed to listen to the matters of which he had treated, and as to the princess, the king had lately told him that he felt himself already growing old, and doubted whether he should have any child by the queen, for which reason he intended in a few days to declare the princess heir of the kingdom.
Oh.
And then that would be the proper time to speak of her marriage with the infant Spanish prince.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk, but because her mother kind of fell out of favor, she really didn't have a lot of options during his lifetime.
Telling me also in great confidence that the French had made the greatest solicitation to have the princess for the Dauphin, and being refused, asked to have her for the Duke of Angoulême, on which they had given them some good words, but that was all they should have. And that I might trust him that they would do nothing with the French to your majesty's prejudice.
There's a lot to unpack here.
Wait, before we go into this.
What?
Do you think that good old Chaps is losing his touch to fall for this ploy? for Henry to be like, oh, no, I'm not having any more children?
I don't know. I don't know how close he was to Henry. I didn't realize they had a lot of conversations together. I guess I kind of thought he talked more to Cromwell and Mary.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
If he knew Henry, I would assume that, yeah, he was losing it if he believed him. But if he didn't really know Henry, if he hadn't had a ton of experience with Mr. Wishy-Washy, then his reports from what we've seen are very, this is exactly what happened. So it could be that he's just reporting exactly what Henry
does
said.
What's happening, but you can always tell that there's bias. There's always his opinion.
Oh, there's bias.
But he doesn't seem to put that in there.
That's true. Well, this really works to his favor because Henry was constantly trying to make an alliance with the Holy Roman Empire against France. He really wanted them to help him out to conquer France, and Charles was constantly promising and not doing.
When he was not friends with France.
When he was not friends with...
He and Francis, man.
Thick as thieves.
Until they weren't.
Yeah, I don't know what I think about this letter. I'm having trouble reconciling all these different moving parts within one letter, which seemingly just seems to be stating facts, but clearly has a lot of...
It's a lot more at play.
There's so much at play. What would happen to Mary?
There's so much
What would happen if he didn't have a son?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because...
I just have trouble believing Henry would ever admit to feeling old.
Fitzroy was dead at this point. Edward was not born.
That's true. It could easily have been out of pure depression. It could have been that he was just like, I lost my son. And he probably felt that God wasn't happy with him.
God, I can't imagine why.
I can't imagine why. But Henry was quite devout in his own way. So maybe he felt that God taking the one son he'd managed to have was some sort of a sign.
Not sign enough, apparently.
Evidently not. Well, it's too late now. She's already dead. What you gonna do?
Heaven forbid you repent and change your ways.
Well, he didn't kill Jane.
No.
Purposefully.
You still got Catherine coming up.
Well, there's plenty of time for him to repent and then to relapse. It was a lapse. Okay.
Anyway.
Whew.
In 1539, Chapuys began to suffer from gout.
As everyone in this court did.
Literally can't imagine where that came from.
Is gout more of a male thing? We never hear about women having gout.
You know,
just
that's
men.
interesting. You're right, I've never heard of a woman having gout.
Mm-mm.
Nevertheless, he remained as resident ambassador in England, except for brief absences, keeping his master informed on English affairs until May 1545-ish. He was recalled to Antwerp in 1539 when diplomatic relations soured, where he remained until 1540.
Why was he recalled? Just because...
relationships soured.
Is that the time when Charles said he was going to back up Henry and then didn't?
Probably.
And then left Henry in France, losing badly?
Probably.
Or was that the next time that that happened a couple times.
He remained in Antwerp until July of 1540. On his return, he worked to restore Anglo-imperial relations and was involved in the negotiations for the alliance of February 1543, which led Henry VIII and Charles V declaring war on France.
Right.
Chapuys accompanied Henry VIII's men to France. His health had continued to worsen in 1544, and he asked to be relieved of his post, but the emperor allowed him to leave only after introducing his successor, Francois van der Delft. You gotta train your replacement.
I mean, you do have to give 2 weeks notice, which back then was probably like
2 months?
6 months notice.
Yeah.
You gotta get the letters and the people. I mean, it's a lot of back and forth.
But they were already on the continent.
But this 1543 attempt, was everybody gout-ridden at this point? Was the whole fighting group just old geezers? They're like, it's gotta happen.
It must have been because God knows Henry was what, 1546? Isn't that his death?
47, January 47. But yeah, this was his last hurrah.
Yeah.
Because Catherine Parr was the queen at this point.
Hurrah!
And everybody kind of thought he might not come back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Henry himself would have preferred to die in battle.
I think so too.
Than to die the way that he did. It sounds terrible how he went. But anyway, Chapuys went too.
Yeah.
It was just all these aged, old, gout-ridden men.
And after Francois Vanderdelft took over. Chapuys was then sent to Bourbourg until July of 1545, when he was finally released from service.
And as I recall, Mary felt a little betrayed that he left.
Yeah.
Because again, Mary never understood.
Because he left from France.
He did not go back.
He did not go back to say goodbye.
Well, Charles did not do what he said he was going to do with Henry. He kind of left him hanging there. So it was probably a pretty good time for Eustace to be like,
To ditch.
go.
Yeah.
It is interesting that we think of this very close relationship between Mary and Eustace Chapyus, but he was still his own person. He wasn't English. He wasn't even Spanish. And so he wanted to go home.
No, he had a very deep sense of national identity.
He was a Savoyard. There you go.
He retires a very rich man in Louvain, where he pulled from his pensions as ambassador.
They had pensions back then?
Yeah.
Interesting. Government service at its finest.
At its finest, all the way back to the 1500s.
All the way back.
It also included pensions from his deanery at Vuillonnet, canonries at Toledo, Osma, and Malaga.
Which are all places in Spain.
Yep. Ecclesiastical posts in Flanders, and the profitable abbacy of Sant'Angelo in Brolo in Sicily, which he acquired in 1545. He had...
Wait, he got an abbey?
Yeah, man.
In Sicily.
But why?
And how?
I don't know. I guess he just bought it.
Can you buy an abbey?
I'm sure if they're broke.
Okay. Interesting.
He had increased his wealth over the years through prudent investments in Antwerp. So whatever he was getting in, he was investing in Antwerp.
It's so hard to remember sometimes that they're spun up in this stuff at court, but there's a get-out plan for almost everybody else besides the main players.
Well, my God, you have to.
You have to leave at some point and support yourself and get away from these
Toxic.
caustic people.
Well, it's just so interesting because you don't think of investment in that way.
No, you don't. Especially not buying an abbey.
No. No, you do not.
I could see him buying today we would buy a winery.
I'll take a winery.
But he bought an abbey.
Chapuys used his wealth to set up a college in 1548 for promising students from his native Savoy.
Again, just all about the Savoyard.
Uh-huh. Only the gateway of this college of Savoy in Louvain survives, so no ruins survive, is incorporated into the Museum Louvain, the city's museum. He also founded a grammar school at Annecy in 1551.
Where is Annecy?
Savoy, let's see.
He founded a grammar school? This guy is like the godfather everybody wants. No wonder Mary trusted him so much. He seems like a really good person.
It's in Savoy. No one's surprised.
Got it. He just seems, I just like him. I like that not only is he gossipy, but he's a good guy. He's like, I have all this extra money. I'll set up a college. I'll set up a grammar school.
Well, and when you think of him, you think of so much rivalry.
You do.
Between Protestant and Catholic, but at his core was not his Catholicism, but his status as a humanist.
Yeah.
Because he had so many contacts throughout the Christian world who were also humanists.
Interesting.
Just off the top of my head, Erasmus and Thomas More. People who were in that court who he would have known and met.
Yeah.
Erasmus, who taught Henry VIII.
Well, just look at his relationship with Cromwell. That is shocking to me.
Exactly.
And he was able to see past the religion and find the intelligence and the man behind it. That is... Wow. Okay.
Yeah. He's not this one-dimensional character that you see on the Tudors.
No.
Shock.
I really thought he was just always pro-Mary, but I don't think that's actually the case.
Well,
Not anti-Mary, but she was not his biggest priority. And of course, she was not Charles V's biggest priority either, which neither Mary nor Catherine ever understood.
ever really accepted.
And you would think that Catherine, after her father had left her there to flounder, her husband dies, her mom dies, and her dad won't pay her dowry, and she's living on nothing.
Yeah.
Girl had to sell everything. You'd think she'd be used to this.
She almost has to marry her father-in-law and then ends up with the brother.
Yeah, well, you'd think she would
She wouldn't be naive.
She wouldn't believe men's word as much. She wouldn't be naive. But Mary does seem to have been quite naive about what the relationship was.
So, I know we did not talk about his personal life very much. He did.
Was there a personal life? Did he have a...
Not really. He had one son through all of this who was illegitimate. We have no information on the mother, but he was made legitimate, which I'm sure was great. His name was Cesare, but he predeceased his father, and so this giant fortune went to the grammar school he had created. Additionally, he endowed a scholarship for English students to study in Louvain.
Wow. Wow. He's just a little maverick over there.
Yeah.
I'm so sad that his son died, though.
Yeah.
Because he seems... kind of want him to have his own life. You want him to have...
something.
More than just the relationships of others.
Yeah.
Interesting. But he just left Mary. He just left France, and he was just like, bye.
Yeah, and I mean...
Did he write to her, Mary, after his ambassadorship, do we know?
Despite all of this evidence, he actually was a really good champion of hers.
Okay.
He was a good ally to her while he was there. And while we don't see a ton of evidence today in this episode, it's just not that spicy. He did briefly come out of retirement to ask that she be given a husband because, quote, she had no other desire or hope than to be bestowed in marriage at the hands of your majesty, unquote.
I like that he came out to help her with this because it is one of the things that I think Henry was most neglectful of. It is
unfair.
It's unfair. She's 27.
7?
How old was she when she married Philip II? I mean, she was in her 30s, as I recall. 38. Damn. That's a long time to wait.
Yeah, that's a long time.
She didn't even get to get married under Edward. Why didn't Edward let her get married?
Because she could have become too powerful and overthrown him because of the Catholic resistance to Protestantism.
Yeah, that's exactly why, because she could have easily. So she's just sitting here like, when? And I know that it was hard to make a marriage alliance for her because her position was so undetermined.
She's legitimate, sometimes not.
Sometimes she was a princess, sometimes she's not. Yeah, it makes it really hard to marry her off to someone really important.
Yeah.
But that woman only wanted to be a mom.
Yes.
Her mother was taken from her. She was never allowed to see her again. And poor Mary just wanted to be a mom.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
So I like that Eustace Chapyus did try. Now, did that help?
No, because this was before Henry kicked the bucket.
Okay. Well, that just sucks for her.
Right.
He came out of retirement, but again, that was years before anything actually happened for poor Mary. And does come out of retirement mean he wrote a letter or he traveled to England?
No, it was more letter writing. He couldn't travel once he retired because of the gout.
Yeah. That hurts.
Mm-hmm. So, that's kind of the end of his story, but I have some pretty great quotes that are just kind of one-offs that I couldn't really fit.
Excellent.
And again, link is in the show notes. These are 6 of Eustace Chapyus' most cutting observations.
Oh my.
On Henry VIII.
There's so much material.
Just wait for this. Quote, his natural inclination is to oppose all things debatable, taking great pride in persuading himself that he makes the world believe one thing instead of another, unquote.
I think that's so biting. It gets directly to the point. Henry was all about manipulation.
Manipulation, and what I say is the right thing.
He would play sides off one another because everybody knew that what he said was the right thing in his mind, and so if he switched, but you were still on the last thing he said, you're screwed.
About Jane Seymour, who everyone paints as this beautiful white rose and this flower of England, and just so subdued after the great concubine.
Well, I mean, it would hurt.
The she-devil.
The she-devil.
Quote, I leave you to judge whether, being English and having long frequented the court, she would not hold it a sin to be a maid, unquote.
What? What does that mean?
I leave you to judge.
Okay.
So it's my decision that she, being English and being at the court, would consider it a sin to be a maid. AKA, she's a bit of a hoe.
Interesting. She was sleeping with Henry, for sure. Her family told her to
Well, I mean,
do it.
yeah. So, I feel like in a lot of media we see her as the virgin, taking the Anne Boleyn page out of the playbook. I can't do that. And
That's fair. She definitely was sleeping with him. I think she was the opposite of Anne Boleyn.
I think so too.
She was just like, you want sex? Done.
But that's not how she's portrayed.
You want me to be quiet? Done.
Mhm.
That's true. That's true.
As far as the sex part, she is very much like, oh, you want me to be quiet? I'm out of it.
Yep. She had one comment about something and he snapped and she was like, done.
I can't remember if it's you should remember your predecessors or you should mind the betters that came before you.
Remember, I chopped off her head?
Mm-hmm. 3. On Henry VIII's behavior during Anne Boleyn's fall.
Ooh.
You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Quote, you never saw a prince nor man who made greater show of his cuckold's horns or bore them more pleasantly. I leave you to imagine the cause, unquote.
Bore them more pleasantly?
Mm-hmm. If somebody had really cheated on Henry,
he would be pissed
he
off.
would be pissed, but he
Talked
would
about
never have
admitted it.
Mhm. In his youth.
We talked about the fact that in his youth, that he took the cuckolding really well if he believed it. But if he didn't, he had just enough.
Chop off her head.
Unoffended. Chop off her head.
4. On Henry VIII's sorrow after Catherine Howard's betrayal.
Goodness, this man just saw it all.
He did, man. He did. There are so many letters.
Oh my God, can you imagine if he had had a Twitter account?
No, that's what I'm saying. He should have been a podcaster.
He could not have held to the 140 character
It would have been tweet after tweet after tweet after tweet after tweet.
The weekly Chapuys report. The Chapuys Chronicle.
On Henry's sorrow after Catherine Howard's betrayal. Quote, it is like the case of the woman who cried more bitterly at the loss of her 10th husband than at the deaths of all the others together. They had all been good men, but it was because she had never buried one of them before being sure of the next. Unquote.
Oh, I like that. Because this was a true cuckolding.
Yes.
This was the one that caught him off guard, and it was devastating. I honestly think that killed him in the end. He just couldn't handle the bubble burst.
He realized...
Turns out he was gross.
He truly had become...
And old.
Yeah.
That's rough.
5. On Henry VIII showing interest in ladies at court. Quote, she is a pretty young creature with wit enough to do as badly as the others if she were to try. Unquote.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That almost feels like victim blaming.
It does feel victim blaming.
It's not their fault. It's not their fault that he can't keep it in his pants or that he changes his mind or that he went mad. Oh, come on.
Yeah, it's victim blaming.
It's victim blaming.
For the fact that most of the time our characters are murdering or are murdered, it's not great, but it's pretty...
Yeah, on the scandal content,
it's not murder.
Well, actually, he's quite high on the scandal content of what he reports, but he does seem to be more open-minded than most.
He does.
Except about the great concubine.
Yeah, well.
Well, she was an exception to everyone's rules.
6. On Henry's marriage prospects after Catherine Howard's execution. Quote, he will not, I think, be in a hurry to marry. Besides, few, if any, ladies now at court would aspire to hold such an honor.
No, who would want that honor, quote unquote? Oh my gosh, man, he just laid that on the line. And are these written to Charles V?
Yeah.
He was sending very personal information and very unflattering information about their personality all the way across Europe.
Can you imagine what Henry would have done if he saw these?
No. I'm actually surprised he was able to send hidden stuff like this.
Yeah.
I would have thought Henry would be reading all of this or have someone reading all of this.
Perhaps that's why he was friends with Cromwell.
Could be.
If you want to look at it from a not humanistic standpoint, it could be very strategic.
It could be strategic. Oh, you've ruined his little halo.
The victim blaming didn't do that?
No. Imagine being Charles V and getting all of this information. He has never met, you don't know this man well, but you're dealing with him regularly. And this is the information you're getting about this crazy man.
Yeah.
Everything was smooth sailing for 20 years, and then all of a sudden, what is happening? And Chapuys is just laying it all down.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I've got the tea. It is piping hot.
He must have had such hand cramps because to write all
Because
of that,
you certainly aren't going to dictate it to someone.
No.
Not this.
Eustace Chapyus, to me, is just now more of a rounded figure. He has always just been
he's
the gossip guy.
very flat.
Very two-dimensional, very Catholic. But in fact, he had something to do with the sack of Rome.
And Spanish.
And the imprisonment of a pope. Whoops.
Yeah, he wasn't there. He just was employed by the guy who did it.
But that's not very Catholic.
Yeah.
That's not nothing. I would assume
That's
that
not nothing.
Catherine would have been very angry about this.
Yeah.
Although it was kind of in the name of her nephew. It's so tricky when religion and state kind of
That's what's so interesting about
that is fascinating.
the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. It's so intertwined.
There was no separation
None.
of church and state, but more importantly, it was a very incestuous church and
Not
state.
to mention that the church was very much able and willing to go to war.
As you say, willing. It not only had the ability, it wanted to.
Well, and compel other principalities and countries to go do it on their behalf with the Crusades,
doing
which
the
why we
Crusades,
haven't
that's
covered
okay.
part of the Crusades, I don't know yet.
I can't believe we haven't already covered it.
I can't believe we haven't even talked about it.
There were 4 of them.
There we have it. We've talked about it.
We talked about it. They were
I'm really
a
interested
pretty shitty thing to do.
about Eleanor of Aquitaine and her misadventures on crusade.
Did she sleep with her uncle?
I mean,
They'd never met, and he was a lot younger.
why not?
I like to think she did. I don't know why, because I like incest. And that sounds bad.
Yeah,
But I just...
it does.
It's like a train crash. You can't look away. I'm just like, you did what?
It's also one of the few true taboos.
It is. And it's one that they continually broke over and over and over again. Uncles marrying their nieces was a thing that just should never have happened.
No, it's all very Jon
The
Snow
cousins
and
is
Daenerys
weird,
Targaryen.
but the uncle niece, yes.
Spoilers!
You think of Game of Thrones as being like so out there, and it's like, nope.
This is the tap down version.
This was life. We've gotten off topic here. I wish we had named ourselves the Chapuys Chronicle. This man embodies what we are. He was looking at history, commenting with spice, had his own opinions, but was still giving the facts as they were.
And that, my friends, is that.
Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next week. Before we forget, we are on Patreon, and the best way to support the podcast, as always, is just to like and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. We bring history to life one scintillating character at a time.
And like you saw today, we always bring the receipts.
I'm Caroline.
I'm Erica.
And we are pithily yours.
Pithily yours.
This episode is brought to you by the Pithy Chronicle, LLC. The Pithy Chronicle is intended for education, entertainment, and non-commercial purposes. Any views or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owner may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. While we offer lots of sarcasm, this podcast does not offer any advice or services. Listening to this podcast may induce fits of laughter, unexpected distraction, or uncontrollable rage at the subjects, hopefully not at us. We hope you learned something today. If not, so sorry. Please be advised we are not experts in the following fields: medical, legal, financial, technological, thermonuclear engineering, submarine warfare, neuroscience, or cat husbandry. Thanks for listening to our little disclaimer. Just covering our history-loving asses. Bye!